Hello and welcome to my updated Lightroom dodge and burning tutorial. This is a much requested video, so I am going to go very in depth here to explain really dodge and burning, not only what it is, but also how you can use it in your pictures to really bring your pictures to the next level. I personally love dodge and burning, and I think it is an amazing tool, and it really can change your picture and bring them to the next level. So what is dodge and burning? Dodge and burning comes from the old film days, and what it pretty much means is just making local areas of your pictures darker or brighter. So reason you do that is to create additional interest, to complexify the light, to really exaggerate the lighting and make kind of dull areas a little bit more interesting, but also in general to just add more different light. So here what you see is a lighthouse. This picture is completely edited. As you see, I have done all of the adjustments I wanted here, but I have disabled the dodge and burning that I've added to this picture. Now dodge and burning is something you can do either with the radial filter or the adjustment brush. I'm gonna go a little bit more in depth about these, how you add the dodge and burning with the actual tools a little bit later when I actually edit photos. But personally, I personally like the radial filter quite a bit more because I have a lot more control over it. Once again, I'm going to talk more in depth about that in a second. So this is the completely finished edited picture, but the only thing that I've disabled is dodge and burning. So here is before, and pay close attention to this area right here. And here is after dodge and burning. So you see, everything just looks a lot more interesting. There's just a little bit more complexification in the lighting. Once again, here is before and here is after. Once again, if you pay close attention to this area right here, you will see that without any dodge and burning, the whole area looks very beautiful in my opinion, but kind of too flat, it could use a little bit more differentiation. So I've just added some radial filters with plus exposure, here with negative exposure, according to the lighting scheme, to just kind of exaggerate everything here as well. And you see all of these dots are either plus or negative exposure radial filters. And once again, here is before any dodge and burning, and here is after. It just makes everything look a lot more interesting, a lot more dynamic. So this is the first example picture. Let me go to the second one and show you what dodge and burning does here as well. So another picture that I've completely edited, and the only thing that is missing is dodge and burning. So here is before and here is after. So you see, in this case I've added just a few very big dodge and burning filters with plus exposure over here, and I think I've gone minus exposure right here. And you see, you always want to do this according to the lighting scheme. So if I disable dodge and burning here again, you see the light is coming from here, kind of shining on this part, and also this part. But in this part right here, this rock is in the shadow. So you always want to make sure that if you add dodge and burning, that you add it according to the lighting scheme. And you really just want the natural light that is already there, kind of a little bit exaggerate that in most of the cases. You can also take places where there's no light, natural light at all, and just add dodge and burning there and just make that area a little bit more interesting. But in general, you want to look out for that because it might not look natural at the end. So once again, here is before any dodge and burning here, and here is after. Just looks a little bit more complex, and I really like the dynamic that it gives you. So let me go to the next picture where I actually show you what dodge and burning does and what I kind of look at when I add it in my picture. So once again, this is a picture that I've completely edited, and the only thing that is missing is dodge and burning. So this time I've actually have nothing disabled or anything. I have to add it, and I'm gonna show you everything I do. But first of all, I want to kind of tell you about the radial filter and the adjustment brush. Now, dodge and burning you can add with the radial filter or the adjustment brush, and at the end it's completely up to you which you like better. Personally, I like the radial filter a lot better because I can just drag radial filters over the image and adjust something and then just right click duplicate and bring it over another part of the image. So that way you really have a lot of flexibility. And I also found that the edge, for example, if I add a pretty big radial filter right here, another thing that you want to make sure is that your feather is at 100, and that way you get the very soft and very natural looking adjustment. So if I go here into the extreme, into the plus exposure, you see the whole filter is pretty big, but it only really affects the very center of it. So you see this very smooth edge, very smooth feather, and usually you wouldn't even add that much, so it looks even more natural like that. And that's also why I love the radial filter. When I add an adjustment brush and I also go 100 feather right here and also try to add about this size of a adjustment brush, and I go into the plus exposure, you see it just doesn't add it quite as naturally, not quite as smooth as the radial filter. But at the end, once again, it's really something you have to decide for yourself whether you like the adjustment brush or the radial filter better. But personally, I really use the radial filter in pretty much all of my pictures. So I'm gonna add dodge and burning here on this picture. First of all, I'm gonna delete, of course, this filter that I've just added to show you what the radial filter does. So first thing you want to do is once again bring your feather to 100 and also invert the mask. That way you really just affect the area in the radial filter itself. And after that you just want to look at your picture. So here it's very kind of obvious. So you see the light is coming from the left, coming into the picture, and what I want to do first of all in this case is just to exaggerate the bright spots that I think could be a little bit brighter. So let me just drag a radial filter right over this part right here, and you see before any adjustments it's kind of where the light is hitting, but I think it's a little bit too dark. I think I can exaggerate that a little bit more and really complexify the light and make everything pop a little bit more. So I have the radial filter right here selected, and the first thing, because this is a bright part, I want to do is just raise the exposure. Now just bringing up or down the exposure alone oftentimes might not be the best possible way to add dodge and burning. I love to add, for example, clarity. That way you really get to make stuff a little bit brighter but still keep the structure there. And in this case I think I'm gonna add some clarity and maybe even go a little bit further into the plus exposure. And also a thing that I love to do, especially in sunset or sunrise pictures like in this case, is to go to color and just add a little bit of orange right there to just add a little bit of more color, a little bit more warmth to the actual spot right there. That's only a thing that I do when I add plus exposure, and only when I added, you know, very colorful pictures where it of course looks natural. So I've already added quite a bit of interest right here, so let me just show you before and after. It just looks a little bit more inviting, the whole picture pops a little bit more. So in this case I would just right click and duplicate, and that's also why I love the radial filter, and just drag it over another spot. So immediately a spot that I personally see is this right here, because as in the background right there you also see a light hitting the scene, and I just want to kind of exaggerate that. So I'm just gonna drag the filter that I've previously duplicated over this spot, but of course as you see this spot is way smaller, so I'm just gonna adjust the radial filter and also rotate it so I make sure that only the area that I actually want to be affected by the effect is covered. And once again, because the radial filter has such a soft effect, you really don't want to go too tight and just make it like that, you know. If you go a little bit further than that, you really oftentimes get a much more natural looking effect. So once again, let me show you before any radial filters, and here is after. So just go with the light and generally exaggerate the plus exposure and make the negative exposure a little bit darker. So I'm gonna go a little bit quicker here, right click duplicate again, and maybe drag it over this part right here. Also adjust the size and also adjust the color if it's, for example, a bit too much. You really can go with all kind of different settings for every single radial filter and really make sure that it isn't too much or too little. So this might use a little bit even less to look natural. And then once you've kind of covered all of the very obvious looking spots, you want to just go to the next spots where there's kind of light hitting. For example, I'm gonna right click duplicate as always this bush, the light is hitting on this bush, so I'm gonna put another plus exposure filter over this part, right click duplicate again, and here it's also a pretty bright part, right click duplicate, maybe over this ferns a little bit more even, maybe bring some color, a little bit of orange back. And you know, you really can add quite a lot of radial filters depending on how much time you want to spend with it. But you see, I really just go with the lighting and make sure that I only add plus exposure where it actually looks natural. So on these trees, for example, maybe even a little bit of more plus exposure. Right click duplicate, and I think I'm gonna add quite a few radial filters right here. I mean, that's really something that almost becomes intuitive, you know pretty much exactly where a filter is gonna work after you've edited quite a lot of pictures. So, you know, every picture is different of course, but these general rules you can really apply, and once you've edited some pictures for yourself using dodge and burning, I think you get the idea. So once again, you want to go with the lighting. I can't say it enough, because if I, for example, would just add plus exposure over here, you see it just doesn't work because this is in the shadow, and you really don't want to interrupt the lighting, otherwise your whole picture becomes unnatural looking. You can sometimes do it a little bit to where you just add additional interest without really completely disrupting the lighting scheme, for example, just a little bit, but generally speaking you really just want to make bright areas brighter and dark areas darker. I'm going to add even more plus exposure filters here because I really think there are some more necessary, because I think some more could work here. And then once you've pretty much added all of radial filters to the spot that you know you wanted to exaggerate the lighting scheme of, then you can go over the areas that are kind of boring and add some more plus exposure filters there. For example, in this case the whole pretty much water right here is a little bit flat, and you can add a pretty big radial filter here and just go into the plus exposure and just add a little bit, and then of course adjust it. And you know, you really can go creative with it. You don't necessarily only have to exaggerate dark spots or bright spots with the respectively plus or negative exposure, but the idea really is to just complexify the light, and at the end you just want to make sure that it looks natural. And you know, your viewer doesn't notice that you've added any dodge and burning. That's pretty much the whole goal, to add more dynamic, to complexify the light without your viewer even noticing that you've done it. So I think I'm pretty much done with the plus exposure filters, so let me just show you. Here is before and here is after. You see, maybe you think it's a little bit too much if you see the direct comparison between before and after, but once you look at it for a few seconds, you really start to notice that it really looks a lot more dynamic, and it really doesn't look unnatural if you don't do it too much. And the great thing also is with the rail filters, if for example this is a little bit too much still, you can just go back to it and just adjust this one filter. So once again, I think I'm done here with the plus exposure filters, and the next thing I'm gonna do is go into the minus exposure. For that I'm gonna add another new radial filter and just go into the negative exposure. This I sometimes like to mix with contrast, but in this case I really think just negative exposure is enough. So I don't really want it over there, but I kind of want to make the dark areas darker. So for example, right there, right click duplicate, make this area a little bit darker, just so the difference between light and dark is a little bit more pronounced, and that way you get so much more dramatic lighting, and it really once again complexifies everything and makes everything much more interesting. In this case I don't think I have to add too many negative exposure filters, because the whole lighting scheme already works pretty well, but I'm still gonna exaggerate some of these dark parts even more than before. And you really don't have to worry if you kind of clip one filter with the other. You know, it's really not that big of a deal. But maybe I'm gonna add another negative exposure filter in between these two positive exposure filter. That's something that really can work quite a lot of the time to really exaggerate and make the difference seem even more dramatic. And you know, at the end I think I'm pretty much done here for this picture. Let me show you before any dodge and burning, and here is after, and you see it's just a little bit more interesting, a little bit more dramatic. And if it's still a little bit too much or not enough, you can just go to the radial filter and then adjust the exposure to where it looks perfectly good for you. But I think you get the idea what I kind of roughly look at when adding dodge and burning, and where I want to add them, and what my goal is to do with them. So once again, before any dodge and burning filters, and here is after. And I actually got the last picture where I'm also gonna add dodge and burning on, and this is actually a black and white picture, and this is a very kind of artistic picture, you know, relatively dark, but I think dodge and burning could greatly help out this picture, because as you see we have kind of a lot of areas that are just kind of flat and that could just use a little bit more interest. Once again, generally you want to make bright parts brighter and dark parts darker, but if you have just kind of neutral parts, you can also oftentimes just brighten them up, and that way you will get sort of a natural looking, interesting lighting scheme. So let me get started with the dodge and burning here. I'm of course going to use the radial filter once again, because I love this tool much more than the adjustment brush. And first of all, go into the plus exposure and just kind of go over the boring kind of flat areas and make them a little bit brighter. Right click duplicate, maybe another filter over here, then another over there, and make this a little bit bigger. Right click duplicate and just kind of make this whole wall right there a little bit brighter, right click duplicate again, and make maybe a little bit of a smaller filter over here, maybe mix it with clarity. You know, you really will get a sense of it once you've edited quite a lot of pictures and used this dodge and burning on quite a lot of the pictures. At the start, I really can only suggest you to create a filter, go into plus or negative exposure, and then just kind of drag around the whole picture and see where it works. In this case, I think I might do a little bit of a smaller one over here, right click duplicate again, and maybe even put one over this bigger rail filter and make a little spot even brighter, right click duplicate, maybe one more over here, and some of the water can also work quite a lot of the times. Right click duplicate once again, and you know, depending on the amount of time you want to spend on this, you really can even zoom in and really get very detailed and very small rail filters. But generally speaking, I don't really do that because I think just staying out and just adding filters on the big view is usually good enough. So I'm just gonna finish up the plus exposure filters here, and maybe a little bit more exposure over there, and maybe another one over here. So already I've added quite a lot of dodge and burning. Here is before and here's after, so you see everything is a little bit more interesting. But then I also want to add negative exposure radial filters to even exaggerate the lighting even more. So I'm gonna add another radial filter here, probably say that word for about 100 times, but I am going to drag this one in between the two plus exposure filters, and of course make sure that it's not too much, and then just right click duplicate, maybe here in the middle, right click duplicate right here, right click duplicate again, and make this part a little bit darker, really go with the lighting and really create interest. Make this part in between the boats on the beach a little bit darker, and it's really a sort of a contrast, but a very you know, a lot of control over the contrast, and very local as well, of course. You know, you're not gonna get any effect like that with just the contrast slider. So I'm gonna add quite a big one over here because that one is quite dark. Right click duplicate and just kind of make these dark edges a little bit darker. Right click duplicate, maybe one more over here. You know, just kind of look at the picture, where does it need more filters, where is it already enough. That's kind of the reason why I don't really like to add dodge and burning while talking on my regular tutorials, because there's really not much to say. Once you get what the filters do, and once you get the sense and the feel of it, you really, you know, it's pretty much the same. It's kind of very easy once you learn it. So I think I might even add a little bit more plus exposure filters on just some more parts over here and mix that with a little bit of clarity. Make that one a little bit bigger, then over here as well. You know, even go a little bit further. I love it just because you really have complete control. You can really add different amounts of plus or negative exposure, and once again really have full creative freedom. So I think I'm gonna close it up here and finish it up, I think is the correct wording. And let's just see, maybe I've done it a little bit too much with some of these filters over here, so I'm just gonna adjust these two or maybe three. And yeah, I think I'm overall done with dodge and burning here in this picture. Here is before any, and here is after. Once again, it might look a little bit obvious at first if you see the before and after directly, but once you look at it for a little while, it really should start to look natural. and it really complexifies, makes the picture so much more dynamic and makes everything more interesting. Once again, here before, you see very kind of flat overall, and here is after, just a ton of difference, a ton of interest. You know, it's really hard to not repeat myself, because overall I think it's a very actual easy tool once you master it. But until then, of course, you have kind of to try around different settings. But at the end, I think dodge and burning is such a valuable tool, and you should absolutely take advantage of it to really create the best possible version of your picture. And once again, a lot of times if you don't even know about dodge and burning, you know, this looks like a good picture, but now that you know how it could look like with dodge and burning, so much more dynamic, so much more interesting, you really want to take advantage of that. So I think I'm gonna finish up this very long tutorial, but I really just got asked a lot what I do with dodge and burning, what I kinda look for, so I just figured I'd show you in very much detail and really show you the actual, you know, what I actually do on two different pictures. So I hope you get the idea, I hope this was helpful to you. If it was, then please take a second to give me a thumbs up. That really helps me out a ton and is hugely appreciated. If you haven't subscribed already, then be sure to hit that subscribe button, because I upload one photography related video, Lightroom tutorial, every single day of the week. And of course, if you have any comments or questions, be sure to leave them in the comment section down below. As always, thank you very much for watching. Go out there and take some awesome pictures and then come back and add some awesome dodge and burning to them. I hope you have a great day, and of course, as always, take care.